Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. We'll be covering tonight Confucius, the Analects. We'll be looking at verses, or book 1, verses 6, and we'll be going one by one through each of the verses. Both Penny and Will have been kind enough to offer to read this evening. And so why don't we start with Penny and then we'll go to Will. And so Penny, if you could announce the version that you're reading and we can go from there.
This is a translation by James Legge. That's the book. The master said, a youth when at home should be filial and abroad respectful to his elders. He should be earnest and truthful. He should overflow in love to all and cultivate the friendship of the good. When he has time and opportunity, after the performance of these things, he should employ them in polite studies.
Thank you, Penny. Next up, Will, would you read your version?
I'm reading from the Analects of Dasan, which is Dasan is a commentator it's been translated into English. And it's a very interesting commentary in this book. All right. The master said, a young person should be filial at home and show respect for elders in the community, be prudent and trustworthy, and care for the public in moderation, but keep close to humane people. If he, after practicing these, is still capable of doing more, he should study literature.
Thank you, Will. Jason, would you like to share your version and then we can...
Among you has something to say?
Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to read the DC Lau, but
Yeah,
Please do. Please do.
Okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Please. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. This is DC Lau, book 1.6. The master said, a young man should be a good son at home and an obedient young man abroad, sparing of speech, but trustworthy in what he says, and should love the multitude at large, but cultivate the friendship of his fellow men. If he has any energy to spare from such action, let him devote it to making himself cultivated.
Thank you, Aman. Okay, Jason, would you?
Yeah, let me share the screen. Okay.
Sure.
So here, that's the translation I'm making. The master said, a young man should be filial, which is xiao, okay, at home, and respect elders outside his home. He should be prudent and trustworthy. He should care for all people and get close to the people of Ren, which is benevolence. After doing this, he can use his spare time to study literature. A few words I like to mention is xiao and the ti. Okay, I think in 1.2 you see it before, talking about the fundamental, right? The root. You are filial piety. Okay, at home, filial. Okay, at home. And go you outside, you have to be respectfulness, or basically you have to respect your elders. That's two important foundation. So here, Confucius is talking about, you can pay attention on this logic, right? Always from small to big. So basics is when you're at home, you should treat your parent, which is filial piety, xiao. And when you go out your home, you always respect the elders. And then he talked about be prudent and trustworthy. That means when you are doing business, you have to make sure your behavior and your word should be trustworthy, your behavior should be prudent. And then one more step, you should. A lot of translations call it love, but I think this I, in my understanding, more like a care for other people, close with the people of Ren, and the Ren who have talked. I think Confucius will talk at least 100 times about Ren, which is benevolence, humaneness, goodness, whatever good as the Ren. Okay, then if you can do all this, you still have a spare time. You can study literature. Okay, this word "wen," okay, I think they have a different translation. Some talk about cultivation, culture, political, but basics, the words you will see many times is "wen," and we can basically talk about this one means literature, writing, or the technical in writing or adequate debate, all these kind of things. But Confucius always consider this one is this important. You should not do this until you are virtual. Okay, you know how to deal with people. Okay, then you have time. Then you study literature. Okay, so the literature means a little broader concept of literature, including all the knowledge like science. If they have the science. So I think that's Confucius want to tell you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Aman, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I first wanted to say that thank you again, Jason. It's excellent to see this translation being done with an appreciation for the nuances of the concepts that Confucius brings to bear that are very difficult to encapsulate easily with English terms. I think it was Penny was reading the James Legge, which is one of the earliest translations into English. And a lot of that was just sort of glossed over. This is close enough, and then we move on. But there is a lot of nuance to these terms. At the same time, in this point 6 of book 1, we get a reiteration of those first 5 chapters, all encapsulated very quickly in one terse verse, where some of these fundamental ideas, run, shall, when, all start to re-emerge and sort of congeal around this idea of this is what a studious, good person is. And a good person is studious, according to Confucius. And if you can get yourself right with the most fundamental component, which is the social component, how to behave with others, then that is when you devote your excess energies to when, which is literature, it's debate, but it's also got a connotation of devotion to the past. These are the voices of people who spoke before you. And so you've now moved, like Jason was saying, you're moving from smaller to larger, from the family to your larger society to a legacy of society that preceded you. And those sort of steps in respect are fundamental to Confucius' ideal of the jinshe, or the, perfected scholarly gentleman.
Thank you for that, Aman. Great commentary as always. Now, folks, go ahead and type exclamation point in the chat to let us know what you've actually taken away, or to share your thoughts, what you've taken away from verse 6 in book 1. Does anybody wish to share? Brian, you can go ahead. I can see you're attempting there to type in the chat.
So again, I've been kind of sensitive to this he-she issue lately. And all of this is he. And my reaction is based on my dealings with young men, both as, students, undergraduate students, young graduate students, and now my own son and nephew. This is great advice for young men, and they're not, I would say they're not very good at it. But the women are better at this. So is this for women or men or both?
Well, too bad. I don't think that's anything to. I just have to say too bad. Sorry. For Confucius. I think in his mind, he probably not think much about women unless you are a mother. He probably be more respectful. Sorry about this, but I think that's advice to the young men. Okay, sorry for the ladies, but for the young men, and it's very different than what we are thinking today, because you look at, he is very conservative, right? When you act, you have to be prudent. When you speak, you have to make sure your words are trustworthy. Okay, step by step, move step by step. You can say his attitude is conservative, but remember, he's talking to in this chapter, we don't know who he spoke to, Confucius spoke to, but I will assume, okay, it's one of the student who is aristocrat, okay, he's ready to be a government official. So that's why he is teaching them, okay, like, you can imagine a young people is ready to take a civil service as a doing the government job, and the old people, Confucius tell him, okay, you need to be filial piety to your parent. When you go out, you need to be respect your elders. When you doing this, when you speak, you have to make sure your words are trustworthy. When you act, you have to be prudent, and then you should care for everybody, close with people, with Ren, because imagine the young man go to a big corporation or doing the civil service. He deal with a lot of his superior, right? And some superior are corrupt, some are lousy, but find the person with Ren, the nice people, be close with this, okay? Don't worry about the writing or the literature, improve your knowledge until you finish all this kind of virtuous thing. Then you do this. That's the Confucius teaching. Okay, you agree or disagree, that's another issue. But that's I try to be loyal, honest to what I understand, what Confucius is speaking.
So as a kind of a follow-up question, how has this worked in practice? Because it sounds like you need to postpone literature for quite a while.
Oh yeah, you don't ask me, I am not expert to answer, right? I'm not saying Confucius is the one we have to practice, but I'm saying he is saying this. Of course, that's conflict here because I think that's true. Let me try to defend what Confucius said. We will assume these people are not like regular people, right? They are the low aristocrat. They are the noble, the kids grow up in the noble family. They probably already learning something. Okay, education is not the problem for them. Okay, so Confucius probably as them don't focus too much on the literature. Okay, because usually we respect the people who speak well, have the right manner, and then write beautifully. But he just turn around and tell him, be careful, be virtuous. Then you focus on that. That's the best I can say. But is that practical or not? That's your choice.
So Amon followed by Will.
I think Jason said a lot of what I had to say masterfully. The only things I would add were the only other consideration Confucius ever seems to give to women in the Analects is as a distraction. He sort of derides the allure of sensual pleasures as one of the things that can detract a young scholar away from his pursuit of self-perfection. And even he has one encounter with a duchess, as it were, that is still under debate as to why did he go and visit this woman. Some people think it was his own moral failings, and others think it may have been because he was job seeking. But either way, it was an inappropriate action on his part. And this is something that I think is important, is that Confucius did not expect perfection from his students. He expected them to fall short or fail, but to learn from their mistakes and try harder a second time. As far as the practicality of this, Jason's right. Most of these students would be aristocrats, or at least seeking to enter into public service of one form or another, because it really was the only employment that one could gain. One could have other occupations, but those would be things like farmer or artisan. And the only place you could go to be employed in service would be through government service, that in traditional China. Because of that, there were a lot of, oh God, I'm going to use a really antiquated term here, but a lot of scallywags who found their way into government service just by virtue of being charming and possibly well-read, but horrible of character. Confucius is stating that the ideal student for him, the person who gets into his academy, the person worth teaching, is going to be the person who has cultivated moral character first. And that didn't have to happen in front of a textbook learning to read and write. That starts in the family. If these students fall short, they then are responsible to raise children who are going to be pious, who are going to show respect, who are going to have human-heartedness then as their North Star. And then those students who have cultivated this character, or those young men who've cultivated this character over a lifetime, those are the people worthy to then spend their energies now devoted into study. He had very high standards and very high expectations, but he wasn't idealistic past the point of application in any way. How it actually played out in application is a different story, but I do have to admit a degree of feeling weird defending Confucian ideas, because they are very antithetical to a lot of mine, but I do appreciate and understand where the mindset is of, I want students who are going to go out and take what I give them, a tool that I give them, knowledge, a skill to think, and I want them to apply it well. The last thing I want is to hand a hand grenade to, an overgrown infant and watch them go blow up, some government in some state somewhere.
Very, very well put. One of the quotes that had actually come up for me when I read this passage and I was looking for it is that the idea where Confucius states, to put the world in order, we must first put the nation in order. To put the nation in order, we must first put the family in order. To put the family in order, we must first cultivate our own personal life. We must first set our hearts right. And being focused on cultivating our character before we start to set out and correct the rest of the world. And I think that's what initially I was looking for, that quote when we were first reading through this. But Will,
You may have just answered my question, which I thought the interesting line to me in this, or the one I was most curious about, was care for the public in moderation. And is Confucian, I mean, he is just specifically talking to a young person. So I was wondering, is Confucian philosophy, I mean, Confucius did want to change the world, but is he sort of, does it advocate for having a small world that you focus on, as opposed to sort of big, ambitious, change the world kind of ideals?
Aman.
Oh, Jason, did you want to go ahead?
Yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, first I'd like to respond to what Joe talked about, the start from your heart and then to your family, learning and the family, your character, family, your neighborhood, your state, and the world. This one is not in the Confucius analog. That's in the so-called the great learning. Okay, so one of the it's a 子思, that's a Confucius grandson, write this one. So back to Will's question about does Confucius want to change the world? My understanding is Confucius is not going to change the world. He doesn't. His interest is getting a job for his student. That's my understanding. Okay, so getting a job for his student because he has some idea to fix this society. Does that mean change the world? I don't know. But later on, in his grandson, okay, 子思, the great learning, so-called great learning, they have a strong idea of you can change the world. But this one is just one of the 100 of the writings. So it's hard to say that's his central idea. But 1,300 years later, 1,500 years later, in the Song Dynasty, Zhu Xi, so-called the Neo-Confucianist, okay, they start to focus on the great learning. That means like sagehood. Everybody have a sagehood in your heart, and you can be the sage king. You can change the world. Okay, so that's in the Song Dynasty. Start to focus on this part. So if you just look at the analytics part, I don't feel, at least I don't. Some people may disagree, but I just don't feel Confucius want to change the world. He just want to help his student get a job, and he also want to get a job. I think that's the mindset. You know, if we limit our reading on this book.
Thank you, Jason. Aman.
I appreciate what Jason said, and he's accurate. But I do have to disagree on evaluating Confucius' ambition. I don't think he lacked for ambition. I do believe that he thought quite a bit of himself, and he thought a lot of his ability to improve in almost a domino effect. There's a lot in the Analects about the value of humility, and Confucius definitely sees that humility is important, but he also believes that there has been a drift from the old Zhou dynasty values, the values of the Duke of Zhou and the people who were these absolute pinnacles of virtue. And he kind of feels like he's the only one who sees it. And so he's teaching his students this, and he is ambitious enough to want the job himself. The Analects spans such a large time that it's very hard to say exactly when we're talking about Confucius. Some of these notes may be 30 years separated from one another. Mm-hmm. And so the ambition of him as a young man, seeing himself capable of changing the world, may differ from his ambitions as an older man when he's been beat down, when he's had one mild success at landing a job and then never landing one again and going back to just teaching. Now, all of that is said with the caveat that no one records anything about him for at least a couple hundred years after his existence. So the veracity or the historicity of the Analects is also something that's really hard to validate. But there is a passage where he says, you know, you give me control of the state of, I think it was Wei, you know, in 3 months, I can get it set right. And that really speaks to this sort of idea that I know what's wrong. I know how to fix it. And if people could just listen to me, I could make it right. I do think there was a I can change the world. And then I do believe there was a we can change the world that came in his thinking. And at some point in that, it became, I won't have changed the world, but maybe you will. The irony to all of this is that probably no thinker has influenced more of humanity throughout human history than Confucius. There have been billions of people who have studied, read, lived by, lived under the ideas that he put forth in this terse little book. And so that is one of the reasons why I like it, agree with it, disagree with it. I have to respect it. And I do put in the effort to try and understand it, because these ideas have resonated for thousands of years.
Thank you, Aman. So with that, Will, were you about to say something, or
Oh, no, just thank you for those
explanations? Yeah, aren't they? They were fantastic explanations.
Yeah, let me just say, I have nothing disagree with what Aman just said, and probably we have a different understanding of the change the world.
Well,
That is possible.
I was.
He didn't see himself as the boss, but he definitely thought his ideas could get the boss to do the right thing.
Yeah, I kind of see like, because I just want to make clear is what we got about Confucius' idea. A lot we got the idea from Zhu Xi, who is the Neo-Confucianism in 1500 later. So a lot of interpretation are twisted, put this way. But yeah, but again, he is 2,500 years ago. We really don't know, who he is.
Well, this is really, it's fantastic to listen to both of you. In fact, I actually texted Evanique to let her know what she's missing. And so, but with that, why don't we go on to 1.7? Would anybody like to read verse 1.7? Oh, Penny, thank you. And Aman.
All right. And this is the same, James Legge, who apparently glossed over things. Chapter 7. Shu Si said, if a man withdraws his mind from the love of beauty and applies it as sincerely to the love of the virtuous, if he, in serving his parents, he can exert his utmost strength, if in serving his prince, he can devote his life, if in his intercourse with his friends, his words are sincere, although men say that he has not learned, I will certainly say that he has.
Thank you, Penny. Aman.
Let me begin with the caveat. I have the utmost respect for the Legge translations, because he was one of the first to take on this endeavor. So this is again the DC Lao. Zhu Xi said, I would grant that a man has received instruction who appreciates men of excellence, where other men appreciate beautiful women, who exerts himself to the utmost in the service of his parents and offers his person to the service of his Lord, and who, in his dealings with his friends, is trustworthy in what he says, even though he may say that he has never been taught.
Thank you, Aman. Jason, would you like to share yours?
Yeah, okay. That's great. Okay. I think remember this one is not Confucius said. Okay, that's his student 子夏. Okay. I think 子夏, 子张 and 曾子, these three are the three youngest Confucius student. So they are, I think 子夏is 44 years younger, and 子张 probably 48 years younger. Zheng Sen is 46 years younger. So you can imagine Confucius is kind of like grandpa to them. So so here remember is Zixia said, okay, not Confucius said. Zixia said, if one can value good people with correct expression or correct attitude, serve his parent with all his effort, serve his prince with devotion, interact with friends with trustworthy words, though others may say he is unlearned, I will still see him as learned. Okay, so one thing here we can notice, one is serve your prince, right? So you can imagine the people they deal with is in the royal court. Okay, so they are not regular people. And today we read everything, tend to take the words as talking to us as I assume we are all commoner. So, so that's the difference here. Second thing, I think both translation, DC Lao and another translation all talk about the beauty. Okay, so here is this word, so-called 贤贤易色. That's a very famous word. Okay, basically talk about one value, the valuable person. 易色, okay, this word 色 means color. It has two meanings, and it's used both in Confucius Analects. Okay, 色 means color, but in the dialogue, that means one means facial expression. How do you express yourself? Okay, later on we will read this part. Okay, so another meaning is lust, your sexual desire, or that's why the translation is beautiful, or the beauty. So 贤贤易色, this is the first word. You can, there's a two way, depending on how you interpret this word, 色. If you interpret as facial expression, that means you have to value the valuable person or the good person with right attitude, right facial expression. If you read this word 色 as lust, sexual drive, beautiful girl, okay, that means you should value the valuable or virtuous people instead of, in exchange of value the beautiful girl. So the assumption is people are, well, again, sorry for the ladies, they talking to men. So the men are always like beautiful girl. So if you like the beautiful girl, use this kind of intention to like the virtuous people, then everything will be fine. So that's another interpretation. That's why if you may see different translation on this one. Okay. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Aman, I really feel like this actually gets back to what you were talking about, the importance of character
Yes.
being put on this in this.
And I wanted to address the gender issue here, because this is Sisha who's speaking, not Confucius, but he is speaking the teachings of his teacher is what he's getting at. And Jason's absolutely correct. There are dual ways of interpreting this idea. Is it expression, or is it in lieu of lust or sexual desire? But what I did want to say was, as far as Confucianism and women go, it took probably another 700, 800 years before a very, very intelligent woman Dan Zhao, wrote the first Confucianism for Women book. And in that book, she towed the party line throughout the entire text right up until the end. At the end, she throws in one little aside that was, oh, and it's important to educate your women, because women who are educated are the deserving partner of educated scholarly men. And so there's something very sly, very subtle in her scholarship, that she understood the values of Confucianism as being very rooted in a patriarchy. She understood her own place in the world as being very rooted in a patriarchy, but she also understood the deeper message of Confucianism, which was, if you can be harmonious with those around you, and if you are learned enough, you can begin to steer the ship of state with a simple word, with a simple idea, eloquently expressed and well adopted by others. In this passage, I don't think Confucius' idea is being expressed here. I think this is, once again, we've got a cadre of young men coming into the academy to learn. What do they need to know? Well, they need to know how to be good people before we get to anything else. And they need to not be, torn away from their devotion to that idea, to that pursuit, by beautiful women or fancy, individuals, but that there is power in learning, real and lasting power, and that it is valuable to a degree that it can be dangerous. Tying this back into this idea, that's why even if somebody is said not to be educated, if they are a good person, he gives them letters. He accredits them as being more worthy than I'll say scallywag one more time, and then I promise I won't use it again for the rest of the evening. But better than some of those scallywags in the service of government. He had a true and abiding distaste and hatred for the people who were supposedly learned men, who were corrupting and destroying China around his ears.
Thank you for the Jason, do you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, just a little bit about gender issue. Okay. If you look at on this, well, later on we will find it. If you have the patience enough to continue in this meetup, to the book 17, he talked about the woman and the small men are difficult. So Confucius always being criticized, have a problem with the woman. So I think the best way to read it is just become genderless. So whenever he talk about men, young men, you just replace with people. Okay, so I think that's the best way. And then about Armand talk about Ban Zhao, who is I think it's 600 years later. He famous writing the work, and to me is that's personal view. He even teach women have to learn this one. That's positive, but I think her writing actually further control the Chinese female right. Basically, she used the Confucius teaching to, in a way, control women more, like come with so-called the 3 follow in. You have to follow your father when you are unmarried. You have to follow your husband when you are married. You have to follow your son when your husband died. So that become a tightly controlled for 1,000 years. So sometimes you will see some revolutionary idea, sounds like improve, but turn out it's get more control. I don't want to talk too much, but basically, if later on to the neo-Confucianism, sounds like it's a revolution, but the result is push the society become more conservative. If you try to understand in the Western world, is Thomas Aquinas. He put metaphysics in question and turned out to make the church more conservative. I think that's the bigger picture on this. So.
That's very interesting, actually, especially when you put it in the context of how it relates to the West. So I see Brian. Ahmad, do you want to respond, or do you would?
Just give me one moment, and I won't take a stand down the results of Ban Zhao sort of rabbit hole too far. Jason's right. The net result was subjugation of women in China remained problematic for centuries. Under the Tang, it got a bit more equitable. And I do think that Ban Zhao was one of the influences for that. I do think that her ideas were subversive, even though she was talking about towing a party line. But I wanted to offer some context. Her text, which was advice to women, basically talked about how to go along to get along in this sort of patrilineal society, where as a woman married off, you would move in with your husband's family. That's an incredibly vulnerable position for a young woman to find herself in. And her advice was, here is a survival guide for this incredibly dangerous position you find yourself in. Tow it through until you have a son, because then you have power. And this goes back to what Jason was saying about the value of the mother in Confucianism. Once you had a son, you had someone that you had a vehicle, a vessel to wield your power through. That was kind of overriding theme of her text. But this one single subversive idea did land, and it did make for more educated women to be allowed and tolerable within this very patriarchal society that probably wouldn't have happened otherwise. So yeah, that's about all I wanted to say about the Ban Zhao bandwagon. I actually see her as a Taoist in Confucian drag, but that's my personal opinion.
That's an interesting description. But so Brian.
Actually, this time it's me.
Oh, Penny, forgive me.
And the only point I would say about this whole conversation is, I'm sure at this time, I mean, there was no way that women were allowed into government service or anything outside the home. So of course it was addressed to men because they were going to be the ones getting the jobs. But just in this 1.7, it mirrors quite a lot, almost point for point, 1.6. And I just wondered, kind of in the framework of the Analects, is this supposed to be more maybe like the teacher says something and then it's kind of like, you know, well, what did you learn from this or something or what? And so the student is trying to show that he has captured the points that Confucius was saying, you know, to be respectful, you know, of your filial piety, respectful of elders, trustworthy with your friends. And if you have that, you don't have had to study literature, you know, basically you're good. So I was just curious, is that kind of the way the Analects is set up?
That's a great question. Jason or
I,
Armand.
I have no answer, but I really appreciate Penny, your observation. That's what I enjoy this kind of meetup, because you guys teach me a lot, because without you, I would never heard about it. When I look at this one, yes, that's a response to that, and talking about the 1.6, talking about then you have a spare time, you can learn the literature, right? And the 1.7 is say, okay, if you say I didn't learn, but I will say you still learned. So I think that's, I don't know, it's coincidence or on purpose, I don't know, but you know, it's wonderful to look at this way.
Yeah, I think we kind of have to abandon the idea that any section of the Analects is about anything in particular. That's hard to sort of wrap your head around, but this is a very non-linear text.
Mm-hmm.
Every once in a while, though, you'll see reiteration of themes, reiteration of ideas. And I do believe that, Penny, you touched on something, the idea that the voice of a student speaking after hearing the lesson from the master lends weight to what the master said, because you're seeing, with maybe 30 years removed from being in the academy to this now being a master on his own, a teacher on his own, Confucius ideas echoed and reiterated. And also, here's an example of someone who took these ideas and is now able to impart them on others. So it's also meant as an abject example. You'll get a continuity of not ideas, I hesitate to even say themes, but there is method in the madness. But this very staccato sort of way in which it goes can drive a lot of Western readers nuts. But looking for those connections, one single verse to the next verse can be valuable, because it was very intentional that they were selected and put into this kind of order. And that was done over a very long time. We got through the first 5 chapters last week and easily spent the whole 2 hours talking about those. But it would be as conceivable to spend the next 2 years discussing one verse, because there are that many depths to be plumbed, or meant to be able to be plumbed. And people did. People spent their entire lives devoted to understanding the Analects on level upon level upon level. So don't feel like you've exhausted something the first time you encounter it and have an aha. There's probably a bit more.
Thank you for that, Aman. Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment about verse 1.7 before we move to Will, please?
I would just like to say I've seen several translations, and only one of them, this Korean one that I have, has it gives names for the chapters, and I don't know, and so chapter 1 is to learn, but the rest of them just say I mean, not chapter 1, sorry, book 1 is to learn. So I don't know, I guess that was probably a later person. That's all.
Yeah, the name is basically take the first 2 words on the each book, each chapter. So that's at least in my opinion, there's no meaning. Just basically just take 2 words. So the book 1 is to learn. Okay, so because it starts with learning. Okay. And to learn is to learn. I have the chance to learn, and the practice is joyful. So that's why. Book 2 start with governments. Okay, so because the govern the people with the virtue, so they call govern. Book 3, blah blah blah. So basically, take the first 2 words. So that's a traditional way to recognize the book. 20 books. So
I would say the first 2 words after so and so said.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, every chapter would just be the master said or Zawei said, or yeah.
Yeah. Skip the master said. Yeah.
Thank you. Would anybody like to then read 1.8 and verse 1.8? Yeah, thank you, Penny. I know that this is, I promise I'll send you a check.
Oh, that's okay. The master said, if the scholar be not grave, he will not call forth any veneration, and his learning will not be solid. Hold faithfulness and sincerity as first principles. Have no friends not equal to yourself. When you have faults, do not fear to abandon them.
Thank you, Penny. My version is exactly the same as Penny's. Aman, thank you.
I thought I'd break it up. We're doing 1.8, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct.
I thought I'd break it up and read Wing-Tzu Chan's translation. And his book 1, verse 8, Confucius said, "If the superior man is not grave, he will not inspire awe, and his learning will not be on a firm foundation. Hold loyalty and faithfulness to be fundamental. Have no friends who are not as good as yourself. When you have made mistakes, don't be afraid to correct them."
Thank you, Aman. Jason, would you like to share your translation? Just a
Yeah.
quick question. I don't know if there is a website, but if anybody knows of one with multiple translations, like we had multiple translations of the Tao, please feel free to share in the chat. I'll take a look myself for that as well. I think that might be helpful. And just listening to the several translations this evening, it's been helpful to me. So Jason got 1.8.
Okay, so I like everybody pay their attention on the logic. My translation is probably different than the previous two, so there's a subtle difference. So if you can catch it, the master said, okay, again, we talk about 君子. Okay, I want to keep the word 君子 and 人 and 孝. I will keep repeat this one because I think that's a special meaning because it show up too many times. 孝, the filial piety. 君子 is the role model, the moral agent, and 人, the benevolence, humanist, so-called the highest good. 人. Okay, so these three words I'm not going to translate. I'm going to keep the original word. So, okay, so the master said, if a 君子 is not solemn or grave, okay, he won't be awe-inspiring. If he learns, he won't be stubborn. Most importantly, a 君子 should be loyal and trustworthy. He doesn't have friends who are of inferior moral standard than his. If he errs, he is not afraid to correct himself. Okay. If you look at the Chinese, they have three words like this: 则不为, 学则不顾, okay, and 过则无, okay. If you see these three words, that means if something, then something. So most of the translation, including a lot of Chinese translation, interpretation, they translate as if 君子 is not solemn or not grave, he won't be awe-inspiring, and his study will not be firm, which I don't think the correct, because they use the 则 2 times here. That means the line break should be here. That's my opinion, but some of scholars also in this way, but most of people doing the different way. They read the whole sentence, these three together. So that means if 君子 is not solemn, he won't be awe-inspiring. His study will not stable, will not firm. But another way to read it, which I prefer, is separate this line, okay, and this line become 2 sentences. 君子, if 君子 is not solemn, he won't be awe-inspiring. If he learn, okay, he won't be stubborn, okay. So I think that's the meaning. And then talking about the most importantly, okay, 君子 should be loyal, okay, and trustworthy, and he has no friend of inferior moral standard than his. He said not as you always make friend you never make friend inferior to you. And the here I just insert the word in the moral standard because I don't believe he means the student have a lower ranking, friend have a lower, no friend has lower ranking, less knowledge, less wealth. I think he means less inferior in moral standard. Okay, so you always have the people. And to the end, he also used the same logic again. If you err, okay, you were not afraid to correct yourself. So that's the translation I am making here. One word here, the 重, okay, meaning in Chinese means heavy. Okay, so I translate as solemn and some translate as grave, but it gives you an idea of heavy. Okay, so you means stable, and that's another reason I believe this the words heavy here, and another words way. Okay, or inspiring. That's my translation. But this word has been used very difficult to translate. In Confucius, look at us, you have a moral standard and the people respect you. But the same words being used in the legalism, they also use the way these words or inspiring, but it kind of like in a position you have the power. People are afraid of you. Okay, so the same word and in Chinese, basically the same meaning, but both Confucianism and legalism like to use this word. And you also need to achieve this word, but do it in a different way. One on the moral, and the legal is more on the power. So that's what I need to say. Thank you.
Excellent. Mon, did you have your hand up?
I did, but I wanted Madeline to go first because chivalry will not die in this
age.
Confucianism.
Thank you. Madeline, and she says chivalry exists.
It does exist, but Amon, you did have your hand up first.
Nali, go ahead.
Okay, I was thinking about the word that Jason translated as solemn, and that it also has means heavy. I think in English, perhaps the word would be gravitas. I'll put it in chat so you have the spelling. It means basically exactly what you were saying. So you might say but you would say he has gravitas, not that he is gravitas. Also, I don't think I know how to pronounce it correctly.
Well, I won't correct you, and it's not because of chivalry, it's because I just don't know. So with that, Aman.
Yeah, sorry about that. I am multitasking as we speak.
Okay.
I agree with Madeline. I think gravitas fits as well. I also liked solemn. It has something of the seriousness and the sternness that accompanies this idea. In addition to that, I think that here again, you have reiterations, but some of these other ideas that I was talking about the sage correcting his errors, for example, or that you should be serious and you should be grave in your approach to things, are reiterated. But there's one other thing that comes out in this, and that sadly reminds me of the Lenin quote. Show me your friends, who your friends are, and I'll show you who you are.
Very good.
This is one of those other cautionaries that any teacher looking at a young cohort being able to speak his mind would want to say is, hang out with the wrong crowd, and no matter what my lessons are, they will not land. You will be led astray. But I honestly have to say, Jason, I think yours is the best translation of the brew that we've looked at, because it does make that first clause make a lot more sense, to bring that semicolon in there and treat it as two separate if-then statements. as opposed to trying to run them together. That's all.
I think that it's a very important distinction that Jason had made again, this idea of it being a more, your friends being moral, and the reason why you would want your friends to be moral and have moral standards, that not that the person is a lower rank than you, but it actually makes sense in many ways, because essentially people that maybe don't measure up to the same standards as you, they if they don't have good moral character, that they probably would then feel threatened by you, so that there is this element of how we work in harmony with other people. That's the way I've taken it, is the importance of having friends that of strong moral character is essential in order for you to be able to flourish, and that's to put a premium on that. It makes sense. So
I did want to echo what you said, just to back it up a little bit with, I think you're both absolutely right. Confucius, although he was almost a fetishist when it came to ritual and propriety, he did put the moral character of an individual higher above that. There's a later chapter, I'm paraphrasing, where he basically says, if the entirety of the state is corrupt, it's better for you to be hated and move away from everyone. You should only be liked and appreciated if the moral character of the state is in good standing. Then if it goes the other way, something's wrong with your moral character. If the state's corrupt, but you're lauded.
well put. So with that, are there any other comments about verse 1.8? Brian? I like this discussion on character, so I could go for a while on that.
I was struck by what Jason said, that in the legalism, this is more about power than, I guess, learning or advice. Because when I read this, the thing that struck me is it reminded me of some let's say incidents I've had occasionally when I was a lawyer advising corporate officers. This issue of faithfulness and sincerity as first principles. The lawyer, in the context of the corporations, at least the ones where I've worked, is purely an advisor. And that's certainly true if you're in the law firm. You're purely an advisor. The decisions are made by the corporate officers. The decisions are executed by the officers. That's why they're called executives. The outcomes are managed by them. That's why they're called managers. It's kind of a powerless situation if you're a lawyer, if they do not want to follow your advice, if the corporate officers do not want to follow your advice. And I'd say that hasn't happened regularly, but it did happen occasionally. And I guess I would even say on things that are pretty, not just on what's good, better, best, but on things that are right and wrong, things that are clearly illegal. I have been, handed my hat and told to mind my own business. So this is very interesting, because I had all these thoughts when I read this. It was very interesting to me to hear Jason flag this difference between this text and then the legalist one. In that context, it sounded like the text is, the learning is intended for more the corporate officer, someone who has power and authority. And this is intended more for just an advisor who has no power or authority. Is that a fair statement?
What do you, Jason?
I'm not a lawyer, so I've never been a corporate lawyer, so I'm not sure. But I think that you catch the essence. And the purpose here I like to talk about is the word way. Okay, that's a very difficult word to translate. I translate as awe-inspiring. Okay, and of course I welcome anybody give me better suggestion, because there's a lot of words. It's very difficult to translate. So it just like Madeline suggests the gravitas. Okay, that's a great word. So I always looking for one word. Okay, I know it's not possible, but I just try, because it doesn't make sense to Confucius say one sentence and you have to write the whole paragraph and call it translation. So so I always want to make sure it's the same length and keep the same tone. I think that's important. And I need to think about it. You talk about the situation of the corporate lawyer.
Well, I guess the only reason I mention that is that for me, I was in the position of advisor and didn't really have power to decide matters. Let's say to spend corporate money, to fire people, this sort of thing. I did not do that. And so I would say I had very little power in the corporation. And I just flagged that because it sounds to me like here you're talking about someone who just gives advice, and not that this 8, chapter book 1:8 is addressed to someone. It's advice for someone who gives advice but does not have decision power.
I'm not sure, because we don't know who Confucius spoke to. Okay, he just said Confucius said. So I would say in your case, I'm sorry, Confucius would say, if you be more grave, more solemn, has more gravitas, people will listen you more because you have more way. Okay, so so probably that what Confucius say, if you have be heavier, gain some weight, so people will listen to you better. Okay.
Right.
So actually, when I was a kid and teenager, when I read this one, I imagine, okay, a Junzi is a little bit overweight, and when he spoke, I kind of like respectful and afraid, not listening. Okay, so that's the image in my mind when I read as a teenager. So
Right.
I don't know how do you think about this, but that's my feeling. And the same words, way, has been used in legalism. When I talk about legalism, I'm not talking about jurisprudence. I'm talking about in the reward and punishment, Machiavellian kind of technique, a craftsman skill. It talk about quite as a ruler of corporate executive, try to push, execute his idea. So that's a kind of two different way of thinking.
Aman, oh God.
Oh, I just kind of wanted to get at what I think, Brian, you're talking about, this idea of advisory position versus a position of authority or power to execute ideas. The truth of the matter would be, at the time Confucius was teaching, there were experiments of state happening in all of the different states. And so depending on in what state you were employed, you might have different degrees of actual authority or power, or just be held for advice. Some rulers micromanaged, others delegated widely. There was no clear designation that if you were to have a government position, you were going to be limited in scope to this. It would totally depend on where you were actually going. but there are certainly cases of people who would be hired on and then have very executive kinds of authority to make their ideas reality. And it's a complete tangent, but the infamous Art of War, Sun Tzu. Sun Tzu demonstrated this in probably what is the most famous job interview by cutting off the heads of the ruler's favorite concubines while he was interviewing for the job because they refused to follow an order, and told his would-be boss, you can't undermine my authority if you are going to hire me to do this job correctly, and got the job. So the variation was far and wide as far as what your role might actually be.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Aman. Are there any other comments? Kevin?
Yeah, hi. I thank you. I'm late. I just basically you guys talking. I got one picture shared on the chat. That's about ancient time or not Confucius time. However, it's still like about the two words 重, right? It's basically you guys translation is for Solomon and gravitas. That's in the court. This is very serious issue. Is over there. You see, if you have to tell the truth, and from the judge, they have the judge, right? Use sticks over there. This is very serious. Another one is 重, 重. Another is 爷, 庄爷. By the way, on top of the word, let me check my picture again. It used to be on the title formally the code 明镜, 高学, or 正, those common words. Later on, I'm going to bring some other pictures. Yeah, I'm going to pause here. Sorry. Yeah. I would hear you guys thinking.
Thank you, Kevin. Go ahead, Brian.
So I don't know, I was struck a lot by this. I don't want to beat this 1:8 to death, but it's interesting also to me, it was really interesting to read this. When you err, do not fear to correct. When you make a mistake, do not fear to correct your mistake. This is as an advisor. And at least let's take it as an advisor. To me, if this is good advice, then we've moved beyond, or China at this point has moved beyond the point where divination is involved. And you as an advisor are seen as a priest or a shaman or someone who can divine, who can figure out divine intent or the future. Because everything I've read suggests that if you divined incorrectly, you could very well be subject to severe punishment. So in this period now that we're talking about, it's not divination anymore. It's some kind of reasoning involved. And if your reasoning isn't right, then you come forth and say it. Is that a fair statement?
It's interesting.
Yeah, no, Brian, I keep thinking about your interpretation, okay, because you have been the corporate lawyer experience. And when I come pondering this sentence, I kind of see your point. It's a advice to a corporate lawyer, right? So you need to be solemn, so you will be awe-inspiring. That means your boss will listen to you more. If you study, then you will not be stubborn, right? So you learn more, and then you be the loyal and the trustworthy, and you always deal with the people, has a high moral standard. And if you made mistake, or you say you made the wrong advice, don't be afraid to correct yourself. So I think that makes perfect sense if Confucius is the advice you when you were in the corporate lawyer. So probably that's pretty good advice, though.
Yeah. Now, what about the divination question? I'm just
Yeah,
trying to
that's really interesting.
situate this thing historically. It's kind of a breakthrough that they're moved beyond divination. It looks like we're talking about something else here.
I think Confucius is not so much on the divination. He tried to avoid it, but he not totally reject it. So it's kind of very subtle difference. And then I don't see here, put this way, Confucius is different than that, put this way, he's more focused. He's very practical. He talk about what
Right.
I can do, what you can do. Okay, so he is not that interested to talking about divination, afterlife, something. I don't know.
So it's like it's rational thinking essentially that they're introducing here, and which is different from other thinkers, maybe at that particular moment in time, or is he the first to bring this to the forefront at that?
I don't know. I don't know. He's the first of the but I just know he's very practical. Compared to other people, he's very practical. Okay, but they have the people even more practical than Confucius. If you compare to the Western world, I would say Chinese philosophy is much more practical, okay, than the Western during this time.
That's a really interesting observation, Brian. Thank you. And so Aman, followed by Madeline, and then Kevin.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with what Jason just said. I was only going to add to it that I think my earlier statement about the experiments of state applies here, where you would certainly have some of the states that were still very wedded to sort of oracle bone divination and the much older ways of decision making. And you had other states that were very pragmatic, as Jason pointed out. In fact, legalism is at its root a pragmatist philosophy of reward and punishment. This is how we make people do what we want. Confucius had very sort of a mean between those two. He had a respect for the traditional ways, though not necessarily reliant upon them as the final arbiter of good judgment. In fact, he would probably say, oh yes, absolutely, throw the yarrow sticks, cast the bones, do the ritual, because that's what we do. That legitimates this. But run it through the filter of good sense and good morality, and make your decision based on that, not on one alone.
Thank you, Aman. Madeline.
Well, I was going to say something along the lines of what Aman just said, except in a far more uninformed way, which is that Confucius is all about the tradition, and he's not. I think in a sense, it doesn't really matter to him whether he believes in divination or not. So I sort of think of him as being like Martha Stewart.
Mm-hmm.
If you think back to Martha Stewart, maybe Martha Stewart is an atheist, but she is still going to show you the best way to set a Christmas dinner table and how to wrap a gift in 47 simple steps. So I think that he's got this kind of Martha Stewart element to him that it just seems to be there. I think in England, they call it more British than the Queen.
Very, very well said. Very practical, I might add as well. So Kevin next.
Yes, just follow the before, I guess, Brian try to look for divination. If you from that angle, you have to look at the yin yang and Dao and Yi Jing, right? Change, law of change or whatever. From the Confucius side, more practical, more easy to understand. Maybe you say, oh, it's not easy to understand. If you think that day by day you practice, you think that's like normal. Why is that's one thing that recently I think about Western. We talk about okay, Chinese philosophy or words. We don't have words like for cognition, consciousness. So I would say that's if that's from ontology, that's the exist. That's mean every culture has that. That's just not exactly words, English words translated to that cognition. So that's very interesting. I agree with, I guess, Joe, so you mentioned that logical thinking. Yes. If you define something is good, yes, you're going to follow one by one. You're doing this, then you know what's happened. You're doing that. It's something not going to, your way. And yeah, that's how do you make your conscious, make a judgment and make then decision making. It's all about what you believe, what you believe in. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Great comments, everyone. Really, really great comments this evening. Great dialogue. Does anybody else wish to make a go? I'm sorry, Jason.
Yeah, let me
please.
talk about the divination. Well, I don't have an answer about Confucius' attitude on divination, but I can give one example. Is like the Book of Change, the Yi Jing. It's a divination book. Okay, ancient people use that one during Confucius time. That's the one to use for make important decision. But today's Yi Jing you are reading, that's a lot full of Confucius or Confucian scholar commentary on that. What kind of commentary? Usually they give the moral sense on that for each divination. So you can imagine if you do like yin yang, okay, many times you call conclusion. This one is a good luck, is good to invade another country, and then Confucius try to give the moral sense on that because because he's bad, I'm good. So this kind of example. So today's Book of Change, Yi Jing, is full of the Confucius idea about the moral, and they stick with the divination, or we want to call it metaphysics, on that. So.
Kevin.
Sorry, you can stop me if because keep inspiring me to say something. For divination, for tradition, I talk about this. My grandmother, my mom, when if they want to travel, she going to ask the fortune telling or something. They're going to base the calendar, the Chinese calendar. They already marked this date, should go out, should go which direction. They already defined. If you're from Western, we're going to ontology, based the time space already defined. Another part is you also use your hand, play, let's see, use dice. You can dice something, put a certain pattern, or they're going to tell you, okay, there's something happened. That's why I'm going to explain something. It's very interesting. People believe it in the 2 generations before. These days is different, much more modernized. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Are there any other comments for 1.8? If not, I'm going to we're gonna try and get 1.9 in this evening. I can go ahead and actually read verse 9, and then we could just share. Instead of reading two versions, we'll just read maybe one, because we have a limited amount of time left. I want to try and keep it to at least around 11 o'clock. The philosopher, and I hope I'm saying this correctly, Tusung said, "Let there be careful attention to perform the funeral rites to parents, and let them be followed when long gone with the ceremonies of sacrifice. Then the virtue of the people will resume its proper excellence." If anybody actually wants to read another version, that go right ahead. Type exclamation point in the chat. I shouldn't limit it to one. Oh, go ahead, Penny. I thought I had the same version as you did.
Well, I have a different version too.
Okay.
This is online teaching and Robert Eno. So, Master Jing said, "Devote care to life's end and pursue respect for the distant dead. In this way, the virtue of the people will return to fullness."
Thank you, Penny. Will, would you like to?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mine says, Master Zing said, "Be careful about matters concerning parents' end, and be present at your parents' departure, and people will incline toward richness and virtue."
Thank you, Will. Jason.
Yeah. I think it's all the meaning of the translation I heard three. I think I should I say that nothing disagree. Basics. It's a very simple sentence. Remember, this the speaker is not Confucius. It's Zhengzi. Zhengzi is Confucius' second youngest disciple, so not so smart accordingly. They call it Zhi at the end, so that means a lot of the analect writing is recorded by his student. So you can see how far he is 46 younger than Confucius, and this time seems like Zhengzi has been achieved a lot. He's been even he's not that smart. He has been working hard, so he been I don't know what kind of job he's doing, but according to analog, he's doing some position and stable job, put this way. Okay, so he's talking about performing funerals with respect and worshiping ancestors with sincerity will improve the virtue of the people. So from this tone, you will know, he is, let's assume he is a male or county male. He has taken care of the people. So his concern is the virtues. Does the people are virtuous? When we say virtuous, is obeying or not rebel, right? What does he do? He makes sure two important things for the people during that time. Okay, you offer sacrifice to your ancestor, right? When your parents die, you have a funeral. That's the important thing. So he talked about 慎终. That means 终 means funeral. So be careful with the funeral. 追远, okay, 远 means the ancestor. So you have to provide the sacrifice with sincerity, okay, for the ancestor. So if you're doing this way, the people's virtue, so-called 德, will improve. That means, the place you are governed will be stable. I think that's he's talking about his political philosophy.
Thank you, Jason. Would anybody like to comment on verse 1.9? Go ahead, Penny.
I actually have a question. I'm just curious in that time frame when they're saying about like providing sacrifices for ancestors. What was that they had to do?
You ask me, I don't know. But I just know in my family in Taiwan, we still do that, right? And twice a month, okay? Was supposed to be every day supposed, but we simplified. So twice a month, okay, we will do it. And the basics before you have to prepare the meat, okay? So, but right now I talk about my family. We simplified, bring some fruit, okay, apple, orange, okay, like this. That's so-called sacrifice. And according to my grandpa, he told me they only have meat, okay, twice a month when he was kids, because that's the sacrifice to the ancestor, so they can eat. So they think, my grandpa told me, his father said, it's a wasteful, have the meat without sacrifice, right? So you have the chance to eat meat, and you just buy meat to eat and not doing sacrifice. It's a waste, right? So I think that's, at least I'm not representing, I'm not talking about ancient China as a scholar. I'm not talking about other places in China or in Taiwan. I just talk about the thing happen in my family right now. Okay, so.
That's very interesting and great question, Penny. I mean, it's just like it's a proper reverence for the dead, and in the instance that you were just talking about, Jason. That's an excellent. That's the second great question this evening. But Kevin, followed by make sure.
Well, we'll go first. We'll second and time.
Yeah, Will,
Sorry.
please.
Yeah, thanks. I wasn't exactly clear how the one causes the other. How my translation says incline toward richness and virtue. Is this the like blessing of the dead ancestors that will cause this, like a supernatural kind of way? Is this what is Confucius thinking?
Yeah, thank you, Will. I think that's a big, that's a very great question, you know, and I should, okay, it's not blessing, not because I should not say this. Confucius' religious idea is very different from the Western thinking. You're doing worshiping, okay, let's say you can call worship or offer the sacrifice to your ancestor, doing the funeral for your dead parents, actually is one way for your moral, okay, not much to the dead, okay, more on the living people, because that's a way to cultivate your morality. So that the logic is here. You have you do the funeral with respect, not just like a luxury show off, right? You do it with respect, okay? And you do the offer sacrifice to your ancestors. That these two things are necessary. No question about nobody not doing it. But Confucius' idea is, how are you going to do it? Okay. So you with respect, with sincerity. Why? Not much on the getting the blessing from your ancestor, more on your moral training. That will make you a better person. So as a local governor, right, you should make sure people doing the way properly, so-called rituals. So if you do this way, the person or the people you govern will be a higher moral standard and they become good people and easy to govern. So I think that's the whole idea in the Confucius religious view, so-called. Yeah, I hope I answer your question. Yeah.
Yeah, it appears that you have. So next up we have Kevin, followed by Madeline.
Yeah, I post another link about we call the 祖先崇拜. Basically, the ancestor. For example, my generation, I have to, my parents. That's especially from man's side. It's very respect from if they are my parents, they are living alive, so I respect them full and. Not just from the daily life, daily activity, we help them buy food, cooking, then also respect. If their big decision, their advice is the most important. Then my parents, then my mom, then myself. So that's tradition. And this one, it's another one. Every time I read this, it's almost opposite of what we practice modern days. Basically, we slightly change the old tradition. We try disconnected from the past, and this speed is faster I feel. Like, by the way, I suggest Jason, still share your Taiwan story. In Chinese, last 2,000 years, it's not changed much, the tradition. What we read the 2,000 years ago, the classic book, the tradition still kept very well. In, I would say, this generation, you got to slowly lost those kind of tradition. So it's very, for example, this one is one surprise that you guys, if you go to a museum, especially for an ancient, you see the Chinese museum is part is so amazing. Why? That's here explains something. The funeral is so rich. It's not just coffin. Inside or outside, they're going to bury lots wealthy if they are wealthy. So that's a good thing for us. We can see the past, how rich, how they living. Modern days, we are different. I just put it different. So I'm pause here. But by the way, I'm going to share my observation about it. If I cannot remember Reagan speak about the Korea War, or like he said that's why we past 3 presidents we're going to fight in war for reasons. But his speech valued. They didn't deny the past presidents. Doesn't matter each party. However, you see these days, modern days, this term going to deny the past term.
Right.
So that's that's not just for our superpower president, also for ourselves. You see our technology changes how quick. What's with electricity? I'm going to mention. You can imagine. And we got a pager. And we got a cell phone, smartphone. Then we go to wear glasses, very, that's going to happen soon. It's an unstoppable. That means the new generation is going to forget the past. Is past not important? Thank you.
Excellent question for anybody that wants to answer it. Madeline, followed by Will.
Thank you, Kevin. That was beautiful. From what I had read about ritual in Confucius's time, particularly funerary rites for parents or other relatives, it was very prescribed. There was no improvisatory aspect to it. And you did everything over a period of days in the exact same way, in the exact same order. So it had a mimetic quality to it. In other words, you are actually physically doing the same things that your ancestors did. And you are performing as if you're performing a script for a play or a choreographed dance. And when the other members of the family are doing the same thing, no matter what has been happening between you all in life, you are coming together and training. ENTRAINING. You're in training with these rituals, and so it's sort of bringing people back together on a different kind of level that's not about conversation or the actions of daily life. And what I had read was exactly what Jason had said, which was that they would set out the meals and everything for the deceased and for the ancestors, and then like later on or the next day they would eat it. So they were also they were honoring the ancestors, but they were also making a nice meal for themselves kind of secondarily in a very ritual way. And so embodying into themselves the food that their ancestors were symbolically eating.
Thank you, Madeline. I'm really going to be interested to see how we won't get to it this evening, how chapter 11 and chapter 9 may relate to one another, or verse 9. So anyway, Will, go ahead, please.
Thank you, everyone, for your insights on this line here. If I'm understanding it correctly, it seems like the parents are symbolically the source of virtue, like, but they're also at the same time really like the people who teach you your virtue. So in honoring them, that's how you would be sort of elevating virtue. I think that's how I'm understanding it. Thank you.
Any thoughts, Jason?
Let me respond to Will's. I think that's I don't think Confucius talk about your parents are virtuous teacher, or he has moral standard higher than you or not. I don't see Confucius or Confucians talking about this. But what he is talking about is you, how you treat your parent is going to affect your personality. So even your parents, there's an example of the sage king, his parent is bad person, but he still treats him very well. So the important is not how virtuous of your parents. The important is what's the attitudes you treat your parent. Well, that's a confused idea. Agree or disagree, that's another thing. Basically, the way you treat your parents is going to affect your behavior when you go outside. And then if everybody treat their parents well, everybody would be virtuous. And then if you become a governor, you become the minister, you become the ruler, you will have everything in harmony and everybody good. That's Confucius' idea on the moral political science. So that's his idea.
Okay.
Thank you both. Elena.
Good evening. Jason, going back to what you've said, when you say the attitude with which we treat our parents, when you say the attitude, could you expand on that, and what does it entail in?
Okay, yeah, so about attitude, okay, so that's the word 孝, right? The filial piety, okay? Confucius talk about, I don't know, almost 100 times in his 10,000 Analects. He talk about xiao many times. And the next book that's full of this word, xiao. Okay, he talk about, again, Confucius never give you a clear scientific definition of xiao is blah, 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 blah. He always have a different answer. For example, for the for the rich student, the noble student, okay, they are rich, right? Confucius' answer, the attitude is your facial expression, okay? That's important, okay? Never violate the ritual, because this student, their life is rich, so their parents always have food or everything. For the poor student, Confucius' answer is, you don't think like you bring food to your parents or provide labor service to your parents. That's called xiao. You should have your heart on that, okay? Otherwise, it's no different than your dog or your cat, your horse serve you. So you should have with respect. So that's Confucius talking about, and that's no short answer. But basics I'm talking about Confucius and no short answer. Basics, they have to long go through the 20 books. You're talking about the xiao, okay? So that's why it's so important here. And then I just use a simple word, your attitude. Okay, that oversimplify, put this way.
Brian, I could see. Go right ahead.
Okay, the couple of things I've been kind of focusing on lately are, again, the kind of the role of women, either explicit or implicit in this. And then secondly, intergenerational issues. And in what we've read so far in this book 1, the intergenerational issues I've seen come up in chapter 6, and now again here. In chapter 6, very briefly, it says, a youth when at home should be filial. So that's when they're young. And and Jason kind of already flagged, it tends to be the mother that's providing the instruction at home. So she's kind of a linchpin in this process, this intergenerational process. I welcome Jason to comment on that, and anyone else, maybe Aman, it's kind of taken for granted, but maybe, let me just say, I would say that in the first instance, but maybe it's not taken so much for granted because, again, this is, as has been explained, this is instruction by Confucius to people who are going to be in the government. The people who are going to be in the government are men. So the instruction is from a man to a man, but they're talking about the role of women in the house in passing on the instruction to the youth. And now again, here there's intergenerational, and the role of the women comes up twice, I think. First of all, do the mothers, when they pass away, do they receive the same respect as the father? And secondly, I can't imagine any of these funeral ceremonies happening without the involvement of the women, that they are absolutely instrumental in getting this all done. Any comments on the role of the women in all of this?
Okay, so I think it's again, when woman only in Confucius' words, only when she become a mother. So I think it's in 1.7, he talk about you value the good people with correct facial expression, serve his parent. Okay, so here he used parent, and the Chinese words is father and mother. Okay, so that's well, I don't remember Confucius talking about mother alone. Okay, you only always father and mother. no good other thing about female. Okay, sorry about this, but that's him, not me. But okay.
So the references to father always include mother.
No. Mother always includes father. Okay, so
Okay,
okay, when they talk about mother, you always find the father in front of him. But many times he only talk about father. I think in the next few chapters, he will talk about you will have the inspiration when your father is died, and you never change father's the inspiration 3 years after your father died. So you always talk about father. He didn't talk about mother. But when we talk about mother, they must have a father over there. So that's how sexist Confucius is, put this way. Okay. Intergeneration issue is always intergeneration. Okay. Confucius never assume you are alone. You always live with your family. So you always somebody older than you. Even when you get old, you still have your passed away parents and your ancestors. So you still treat them as they are living, they are alive. So that's always intergeneration. It's never gone. It's always there. So you always have kids, son. He assumes you always have son. You have to treat your son in certain way, and your son must treat you in certain way. So that's his idea in the society. So
thank you.
Kevin.
Yes, I want to share one. Is like, for example, Father Brian bring the question. I like, you guys bring questions and share your tradition, would be great. From Brian and I forgot his wife name. That's a perfect sit there. That's the film. If you watch Chinese some drama, all like that. For parents both sides, dad and mom, and the downside then the first son is the big son. That's the next relation to follow order from that aspect. The one aspect, let's see the one parent, you see the okay, should the woman follow the man, and so the son follow follow the parents. So in case let's say father passed away, who should follow? Follow the mother or follow the big son? The answer is follow the mom. So even the son is very important too, the first son. But that's the order. However, if you have a grandpa mother, even further, that's the first. You base that order. That's default. That's like common practice like that.
Thank you.
Sometimes, yes, thank you. Sometimes this practice, like for example, a funeral with wealthy, sometimes people bankruptcy because of that. They cannot afford that kind of funeral. So you can anything like yin and yang, something kind of good side, respect parents, it's too much. You need to think about. If not think about it at all, where we come from. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Thank you, everyone, for your comments this evening. Jason, do you have anything that maybe you want to close on?
oh yeah, thank you everyone. And then we don't have a big crowd, but we have I feel like we have a very meaningful conversation. And, and thank you everybody. As a lot of questions I haven't thought about. That's wonderful. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I want to second that. This has really been a fantastic meetup. I've enjoyed listening to everybody's comments and learned a great deal. And I really do appreciate some of the virtue ethics that Confucius speaks about. But it's important to point out his shortcomings, which we seem to be able to do as well. This has been really, this has been a lot of fun. So I'm enjoying it. It's a privilege as always. So thank you everybody for your comments. They really, really have made my day. I'll just say that. And so with upcoming events this week, we have tomorrow night, Shrikant will be using his diagram. It'll be integrating the physical, the emotional, the intellectual, and the spiritual and the moral of Louis Sullivan on his new graphic. And he has actually a new version. So I'm excited about that. That'll be at 9 o'clock tomorrow evening. And Thursday, we have the Evolving Self, and that is being hosted by Maritza. And that they will be covering chapter 8. So if you haven't been following with the book, you're still able to attend and keep up. So it's not a problem at all. We'll be continuing chapter 11 of the Bhagavad Gita. That's been a fabulous series, as most of you already know. And that is Thursday at 9 p.m. as well as Friday at 9 p.m. And then I thought we had something this weekend, but apparently we don't. I think Shrikant is actually leaving us on Saturday. So yeah, hopefully I'll see everybody again. We won't be having a session for the Confucius next week, but we will be back on the 24th, I believe. So yeah, so just keep your eyes out for the announcement. And again, thank you everyone for really making my day. This was a lot of fun this evening. So thank you, Jason, for the translation. And then Jason, actually, you're hosting something? Forgive me for not announcing that this weekend, aren't you?
Yeah, we have every week. This week is Hinduism, the seer,
really?
the seer and the sin. Okay, SK. Okay, yeah. So and the next week we do the Qin Dynasty. Okay, a little bit the Chinese history. Okay, and
That's on Saturday. Next Saturday.
Next Saturday, and this Saturday is Hinduism, and next Saturday is Chinese history. We will start to bring a little bit more history stuff, I think, because after we moving on, a lot of it is historical related. So I think that probably makes sense to introduce some Chinese history, but still focus on the philosophy or intellectual culture, something like this.
Well, hopefully I will see you Saturday. Saturday evenings have been kind of difficult for me lately, but
yeah, I know it's right now it's a post-pandemic. I think so. when I started, I have a pandemic in my mind. Like, what am I going to do? Right? What are the people going to do? So Saturday is the best time. But right now, Saturday probably the worst time. So,
right. Well, you're more.
Actually,
you're still in the. Oh, go ahead, Brian.
I looked for his meetup for Saturday. It's not yet posted. The 52 Living Ideas. I guess if I look to Asian philosophies.
Yes. Do you want to
go to the World Philosophy group? It's there, and I post there, and I always give to Shrikant, and Shrikant sometimes posts early, sometimes late. So
World Philosophy group.
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed it's been posted on that lately.
Yeah, because I posted on time, but then in the Shrikant in the 52 Living Ideas, that's usually have the delay. Okay, so for example, let me share this link so you can sign up. So that's the link. You can sign up, and then because I coordinate with many groups. So yeah, so people come from different groups to
Well, Shrikant will definitely be posting it
he will post-
probably this evening.
Yeah.
So
Depend on how he usually posts on the Tuesday evening.
yeah. And so yeah, I think actually hope he should be posting both events. Both events not Saturday and the following Saturday. So that make sure he's covered while he's away. So so again, thank you everyone for another great session. I really did. I can't tell you. I really very much enjoyed it. It was a very, very nice ending to the day.
Thank you, Joe.
Appreciate it. I mean, yeah, the questions were amazing, and as were the comments. All right, I'll see everybody soon. It's a privilege as always.
Bye.
Bye bye. Bye.